glass bottles.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And yes, we're back. We still do exist, just about. So welcome all who are listening to us. And oh, Rubber has just shown up. Here we are. Rubber, good evening. How are we doing?
I'm fine. We're just having a bit of settling the family down for the night. So I'll be
no problem. You settle away. And Tailed was just about to go into a monologue on the virtues of pint glass bottles of milk being delivered.
Yeah. Put me on the spot here, why don't you? No, I was just.
Well, I mean, you were just preparing a cup of tea, and I had Linda Law here in the chat, sort of saying late. So I suggested patience, folks. We're waiting on Tailed Features tea to brew. These things can't be rushed. Civilization depends on them.
Absolutely.
So yes, you then told me that you just poured yourself some milk into your tea from a glass bottle, and you said it with a certain amount of pride that you weren't one of these, how should we say, sort of Tesco-dependent minions that pours milk from a plastic bottle.
Yes. It always amuses me that because it's only been the last couple of years that I've been getting milk delivered in a glass bottle, but it's really funny when you explain to the kids nowadays that isn't it a great idea to have the milk delivered in an electrified vehicle and in returnable and reusable receptacles. Who'd have thought of such an idea?
Yeah, way ahead of you.
Yes, yeah. All I can think of is a little man trying to deliver glass bottles that the enemy milkmen are smashing up, yelling, "Mr. Grimsdale, Mr. Grimsdale," at the top of his voice. But yes, that's for the people who are initiated. But yes, I agree with the chat suggesting this. I think Sunny Jim says milk tastes better from a proper bottle. And there is something strangely psychological that goes on there, because it's true, it does taste better. I don't know why that is. No doubt Jordan Peterson could tell us all about it.
Well, I think with plastic containers in general, that some of the plastic transfers, even just a microscopic amount, but it transfers into the milk itself. I think you avoid that with glass.
What I'm actually talking of is not just sort of slightly psychological snobbery, but in fact there is some scientific merit to the fact that I believe it tests.
And also glass, when you put a glass bottle in the fridge, the milk goes colder and it's more refreshing.
True. Yes. Actually, when it comes to glass, one says that glass had a significant scientific impact on the world, because I think it was the Egyptians, who first made glass, or at least in the ancient world, they were known for glass making. I'm not saying they invented it.
But the Chinese didn't.
But the Chinese didn't, precisely. They relied on porcelain, and the problem was that their porcelain was so good that they never saw any reason to change. And glass, of course, is ideal for chemicals. It doesn't react in any way to it. And therefore, the Chinese unwittingly were hampered by the fact that from very early on, they had an excellent product. And therefore, they never needed to look for something else. And therefore, we ended up with access to glass vials in which we could mix chemicals and whatever that wouldn't react to the container itself. So yes, it's strange how these things work, that sometimes you can get an early advantage that actually ends up being to your disadvantage. But I just think I'll take this opportunity to confess that, like Tailed Feature, I get glass bottles of milk and I love it.
Absolutely, and it's a shame that the Chinese never had glass, because being such big fans of tea, it's what would have made their tea just that little bit better, was if they had glass bottles of milk.
There is that. Yes. So, Rubber, are you in the glass bottle fraternity or?
Yeah, my heart is certainly in that, because when we were living in London, there was a local dairy, and we used to get the twice a week delivery, and also you could get orange juice in the same glass milk bottles.
Yes, precisely. They come in the same pint bottles. Yes,
and eggs as well.
You will forgive me. You will forgive me when, to me, that sounds a bit odd when you say you lived in London, but you had the local dairy. I mean, are these the Hyde Park dairy cows? Or?
No, well, I was living in northwest London, and the main dairy was Unigate, which is if you've ever driven, I think it's on the M4, but as you head out of London, on the early stretches of the M4, you'll see the Unigate dairy, and they had these little model cows on the roof of the dairy itself, and that's not fantastic. So that's where the main dairy was, and then they would have these kind of substations in around northwest London where the milk floats were, and I was able to do that. Now moving out to the leafy shires, there isn't anything like that nearby. So
there is a certain paradox there, that now that you're actually closer to the milk,
I'm closer to the milk, yeah, but not closer to a dairy. So
well, there you go. But yes, I think we've all now got a nice mental image of the Hyde Park dairy plant. But yes, I've just got one or two super chats here that I'll just try and get through before we go on. So we've got Auto Chaff. Speaking of using the right thing, I use my Britisher tea only mug for microwaving frozen peas, carrot, and corn before pouring them onto my plate. Auto Chaff, I hate you.
It's fine. Then you just send the mug back.
Then we have got Marangatu breaking my no super chat resolution to tell you, despite media, PM Jacinda, I'm assuming this is Jacinda Ardern, is unliked more and more by the day. She was chased out of a town recently. I don't really need telling that Jacinda Ardern is loathed, because she is loath-worthy. I cannot abide the woman. And in all fairness, I don't need COVID for that. I think I actually, when I made that video about explaining the nations of the world to Americans, I started by saying Canada was known for having, terrible politicians, and it was a picture of Justin Trudeau. And then when I went full circle, I ended up with New Zealand sharing that criteria with that criterion with Canada, namely having loathsome politicians, and there was a picture of Jacinda Ardern. So I'm with you on this. So then we have got Mr. Will Guitar. Oh, well, there you go. This is your future solo, future duet contributor, Tailed.
Can't wait.
Welcome back, Sir Britisher. I, of course, have nothing of any intelligence or relevance to contribute. Well, just like everybody else. But would like, just including us on the panel, would like to say I actually drank tea the other day, but not from a Britisher mug, sadly. Well, I mean, it's obvious that is even worse. Having to drink tea not from a Britisher mug is even worse than not having the milk to add from a glass bottle. Then we've got the super chats are coming fast and furious here.
Yeah, aren't they?
Ends beginning. Aloha from the Sandwich Isles. I'm always glad to see people using the proper names for these things. Britisher, Tailed, and Rubber. Welcome back. So glass helps tea. Well, it helps the milk that goes in the tea. That's the key thing. So it's
the only thing that I about getting the milk delivered and stuff that I wish you could do. There's just not enough people getting milk delivered for this anymore. But is putting having the little basket sit outside with a number on it.
I must confess, I am one of those little basket people.
All right, so no one else in my street gets milk delivered like this. So
this is a household that has a little basket with a handle where the milk bottles go in.
Does it have the little thing that you flick up to tell the milkman how many you need?
You can use that, but this is always turned towards the front door here as to not confuse the delivery chap.
All right, yeah, because it's all done online these days. Your order,
yes, precisely. So. But it has an indicator, yes, as to how many pints you might want.
Yes, I long for those days, even though I can remember
I'm one
them.
of the professionals here. I have everything in hand. This is a glass bottle milk in basket at front door household. Yes. And then, ladies and gentlemen, we have here Agnar, the Viking. Yes, and he's gone berserk again, ladies and gentlemen, with $120. So thank you very much, Agnar. But do keep yourself under control, will you? Wow, looks like the Germans didn't dismiss you from life. I wish I could say, but I removed your stream time slot for other things. Enjoy the money. Sorry, I wish I could stay. Oh, so there you go. I will very much enjoy the money, Harknar. And thank you very much.
I think we should
who knows? Maybe at some point you'll find your way back. As I said to Tailed Feature before we came on, I have, some may have noticed this, changed the thumbnail just a little bit. And that is, it no longer says weekly stream. It just says irregular stream. Because, how shall we say, my ability to be regular in terms of streaming has been somewhat ridiculous as of late. So yes, apologies, people. One is trying, as I think this evening demonstrates. But here we are. Yes. Then we've got Simon Butterfield. Well, you're on at the same time as Critical Drinker. Oh well, I'll have to catch up with him later. Laughs. Well, there you go. See, this is a gentleman who has his priorities right. That's all I can say. At least I don't slur my speech, as some supposed film critics do.
Apparently, I sound quite a lot like him. I've never actually listened to him.
You don't.
I've never listened to. I've never watched.
No, you don't. In all, really, you do not sound anything like him. But there you go. But Hagnar is back with another $30. Oh, I almost forgot. Germania delenda est. Yes, it's always good to know that Cato the Elder lives on. Yes. He'll
Hagnar, I've got a way that you can pay me money now as well.
You'll always be proclaiming the virtues of Germany, will you, until he comes onto your stream?
No, well, it's I don't know. It's either that, or I think we should get a cut for the.
Oh well, So then, when it comes to Germany, actually, I mean, they've been in the news a bit, haven't they? Because we have got that minor little issue in the Ukraine, and yes, I say the Ukraine. I don't say Ukraine. That's a ridiculous, fashionable habit as far as I'm concerned. It's the Ukraine. It always has been. And of course, one is trying to deter the Russians from attacking because they've been amassing troops, or in a manner of speaking have been doing so. And various countries have been sending military aid and all sorts of things to the Ukraine. But the Germans have, I think, sent a sort of a medical center, which no doubt, yes, costs a lot of money. And they've sent 5,000 helmets.
What are they going to send next? Pillows, was, I believe, the comment.
That was, yes, that I believe was the mayor of Kiev, that I believe is Vladimir Klitschko, who said, yes, what are they going to send next? Pillows. And again, just as it is the Ukraine, it's also Kiev and not this ridiculous Kiev. This is the same thing as the capital of China is Peking and not Beijing. Because we don't set a separate rule for them as for everyone else. Because If the capital of France to you isn't Paris, but Paris, then why are you making an exception for the Chinese? So anyway, yes, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent again.
No,
Anyway, the Germans...
we don't correct the French when they go. They say ici Londres, and we said no, London, not Londres. No, we just let them have it. That's the way they pronounce our capital. So that's just it.
Precisely, yes.
I don't get on at them for saying Écossais,
Écossais, yes,
rather than Scotland.
It's strange, isn't it? Écossais is quite far away from Scotland in terms of pronunciation, and you just wonder how did they get there?
I've never actually checked the etymology of that. I might do that now.
But yes, the Germans there are in a bit of hot water because it seems as if one is trying to set sort of economic interests, Nord Stream 2 pipelines and so on, over
it's
and
because
above.
It's because the Germans want hot water. That they're being very milky.
I don't know why they would want hot water, because they're not even known for drinking tea.
Now, it could be because for their, one of their 9 showers a day that they take.
Yes, or their toilets with those strange steps in them, so that they can inspect their stool before they flush. Which I'm not kidding, people. These things exist. But yes, given that we've already ended up on that sort of subject, then today we had a bit of sad news, but nonetheless sad news, which allows us to highlight the contribution of some chap, because Barry Cryer died, and I think I saw Tail also tweeted that out.
Yes.
Because Barry Cryer was quite the contributor when it came to comedy.
Prolific, one might say.
There's almost nobody he didn't write jokes for.
Yes.
And on top of that, of course, he was also a regular on I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue. Yeah. And that is kind of the ultimate panel show. I mean, obviously, it's been replaced since by this live stream. But I wish. But
back in the day.
I mean, all these things like Have I Got News for You and whatever were actually television renditions of I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue that was made for radio. And if you ever get to hear an old episode of that, I mean, they were really masters of the game. But wasn't there, I mean, Rubber will know this. You know what my memory is like. The only thing I remember are Romans. Wasn't there some administrator or whatever, some lady, and they always picked on her? Everything was always her fault.
Samantha.
Samantha, although sometimes it's Sven. It's one of the things about the show, because the show is completely nonsensical. The game, it's not really competitive. The games are not really... the rules are very fast and loose, but the whole thing with Samantha is that she doesn't exist. So back in the day, the original host was Humphrey Littleton, and now it's Jack D. But they would also they do this bit with and keeping scores tonight is the lovely Samantha, and their pianist would play the kind of that kind of sexy trill on the piano that you would often get in a nightclub, and the audience would cheer, and just no one's there. They just point to an empty seat, and there's always there's always some kind of innuendo about how
there is a lot of sexual innuendo about her.
That's the thing about it. It goes out on 6:30 on Radio 4, and it's filthy, and it's always been filthy. If you listen back to old recordings from the 70s and 80s, it's kind of smut that gets under the radar. I think my favorite I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue joke is when they were doing sound charades, and they said this game is based on the popular television show Give Us a Clue, hosted by Lionel Blair. Many gasped in amazement when he was able to pull off 12 Angry Men.
Do you want some examples of this smut from?
Go on then. Go
right,
on then.
okay.
We stand ready to be aghast.
Okay. Well, it's actually quite tame. You know, unless you're well, if you're a kid, you're not gonna. This is gonna go over your head and all that kind of thing. But things like Samantha is a qualified croupier and often works at an exclusive Soho club where gamblers pay top money to play roulette all day and poker all night. It's very subtle things like that.
Yeah,
sometimes. It's just all these sort of innuendos.
We're very much in Barry Cryer territory, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. I've actually prepared some Barry Cryer jokes for if you want.
Oh, well, by all means. I think we can do with some light relief here. Yes.
So
I was amazed to see who he had written for, because for me, growing up, Barry Cryer was just one of those. I wouldn't say he was on television a lot, but he would crop up, and he was always, it's that guy.
Yes.
But then realizing just how much of a contribution he made to so many shows, and he really does link multiple eras of British comedy, because perhaps the oldest performer he wrote jokes for was Arthur Askey, and that's kind of harking back to the music hall days.
Yes.
And I think the most modern comedian he's written for is Peter Kay. So he's kind of it has gone from across different eras and being the kind of unifying presence.
Well, he would be one for an episode of Comedy Connections.
Mm.
Do you remember that?
He's the universal connector.
I was going to say, the mega episode where absolutely everyone's connected.
But do you want to give us a gag or two here, Tailed?
Sure.
From the Barry Cryer stable.
Well, I mean, one of the more recent ones, and I think I included this in my tweet. I thought it was quite recent, and I'm sure he said it more than once. But apparently, I actually started telling this joke about 15 years ago. So he'd been 70 or so at that time. He basically said, "I'm so old now, I've stopped buying green bananas." Yeah. So one of the most common ones that I saw being tweeted around today was a man was driving along a country road and he hits a cockerel. He takes it to the nearby farmhouse and says, "I'm really sorry, but I've just run your cockerel over and I'd really like to replace it." The farmer replies, "Please yourself, the hens are out the back." I think my favourite one, because he quite likes parrot jokes as well. That's probably my favourite one. The woman goes into a pet shop and sees a parrot for only £20. The shopkeeper explains it's cheap because the parrot used to live in a brothel and its language might be fruitier than most. The woman buys it anyway. She takes it home, puts it in the sitting room. "New premises," squawks the parrot. "Nice." The woman's two daughters walk in. "New girls too," says the parrot. "Very nice." Then her husband arrives. "Hello, Keith," says the parrot. And he also once said, he says, "I met my wife and Ronnie Corbett on the same day." He once quipped, "I tossed a coin and married her." So a lot of things like that, because obviously he did a lot of writing for the two Ronnies and that kind of thing.
Well, it kind of, I mean, he was basically, that was his craft. It was just basically writing gags.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a department once. Would you believe it? I mean, it's so bizarre. In the BBC nowadays, they have a compliance department, and if you basically have planned to tell any joke on any program, you have to submit it to the compliance department. It's that ridiculous by now. Whereas once upon a time, if you go back a few decades, they actually had a gag department, which meant if on any program you wanted to include a gag, so basically there was a gap here somewhere, and you wanted the game show host to have something to say, and your team couldn't think of anything, there would be a ready gag team at the BBC. There would be about half a dozen guys in there, and they did nothing else the entire day for radio programs, television programs, of trying to come up with gags, no matter what the context. And of course, you can imagine that was an enormous sort of training scheme. If you could do that for a few years, after that, you would have the knack of, no matter what came up, you would be able to come up with a joke for it. And I think the most famous guy to emerge from that gag department was the chap who then wrote To the Manor Born. So they would once in a while sort of give one of the guys in that team a chance and say, okay, look, at the moment, all you're doing is one-liners, but we would like you now to sort of see whether you can do something, a bit larger, a bit grander. And they gave him the chance, and he wrote the sitcom of the 80s with the highest viewing figures. And that's in a way what you get if you have these sort of apprenticeships. And if you think of it, I mean, Barry Cryer, his entire life was one endless apprenticeship of writing gag after gag after gag. And I didn't know he went back as far as Arthur Askey. But yes, it tells you everything you really need to know. I mean, chances are that's how he started out. He thought up a few funny lines and send them into Arthur Askey, saying, well, use them if you can, if you think they're any good. And once he could then say, well, I've written some stuff for Arthur Askey, then he more than likely would get his foot through the door somewhere else. Eventually he became a national institution.
Yeah, I mean, the people he's written for, it's an absolute who's who of comedy. Not just British comedians either. He did write for Americans as well. He has done some some comedy for Jack Benny, George Burns, Richard Pryor as well.
It explains why even American comedians occasionally are funny.
Yeah, very occasionally. He's written for Dave Allen, Stanley Baxter, Rory Bremner, Jasper Carrot, Tommy Cooper, Les Dawson. I'm going in alphabetical order here, reading off the Wikipedia page, but Dick Emery, Kenny Everett, Bruce Forsyth, David Frost, Bob Hope, Frankie Howard, Spike Milligan, Mike Yarwood, Two Ronnies, Markham and Wise. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, Bob Hope is quite a claim for the American, for an American audience. That's the kind of standard, isn't it? If you've written one-liners for Bob Hope, then you're someone.
Yeah, pretty much. So I was speaking to Robba about Barry Cryer earlier today, actually, and so I was very lucky to be able to see a recording of "I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue" live just before the pandemic. Actually, went along with my mum because I was brought up listening to Radio 4 comedies and all that kind of thing. So it was very good. So Barry was there. Tim Brooke Taylor was still around as well. So that was a good thing to see before he passed. But yeah, I've got a couple other jokes if anybody wants.
Go on. No, we can't get enough of this. Please continue.
Try a tribute.
Yeah, well, it is. I always like this one. As I got older, food has replaced my sex life. I've even fitted a mirror above the kitchen table. I have a stair lift that is so fast it gets me upstairs before I've forgotten what I went up for. And then this one's a bit longer, but so a man and his wife are out walking one day when they spot a lone fellow on the other side of the road. That looks like the Archbishop of Canterbury over there, says the woman. Go and see if it is, she adds. The husband crosses the road and asks the man if he is indeed the Archbishop of Canterbury. Fuck off, says the man. The husband crosses back to his wife, who asks, what did he say? Is he the Archbishop of Canterbury? He told me to fuck off, says the husband. Oh no, replies the wife. Now we'll never know. I do like that one.
I met him and the rest of the I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue cast a few years ago. They were doing a book signing in London, and I went there. So I've got their Limerick book, which is well worth it. But I got them all to sign it, and yeah, I mean, it was just I'm there. They're doing readings from the book in advance, and then doing the book signing, and I just realised I'm sitting 15 feet away from Tim Brook Taylor, Graham Garden, Barry Cryer, and just think, whoa, this is amazing.
So who else signed that book then? Who else did you meet that night?
Humphrey Littleton.
Excellent.
And Colin Sell on the piano.
Right, yes, of course, the pianist. Yeah.
You see, I'm always worried when Rubber starts with this, because there is this pattern building of, is there actually any living celebrity, leading politician or anything that Rubber has not in some way, shape or form met?
Well, it's slightly different from I can't remember what the guy's name is, who comes in and says, well, of course, Colin Sell was actually my wife's second cousin, so
That is that, yes.
I always, with because I've worked with a few celebs, some big, some small, when I was back in the film industry, but it was always just these limited jobs. You come in, sometimes a small budget film would get a big name actor for 2 days, so you just meet them over a 2-day period, or you just get invited to something and somebody's there and you just meet them briefly. So I can never claim, with the exception of Michael Gove, I can never claim any kind of
in that regard,
connection.
Rubber is the person who gets invited, isn't he, Tailed? I think we're agreed. We're agreed on this by now. So, Rubber, how were the 10 Downing Street parties over the lockdown?
You know what? I can't remember, so it must have been good.
Yes. But anyway, given that Tailed seems to be in talkative form today, and given that this week's dates for the week in history are the 24th of January to the 30th of January, this, of course, includes the 25th of January, which includes 1759. Robert Burns, Scottish poet, whose popularity is reaffirmed in the Burns Night celebrations, was born in Alloway, Ayr.
That is correct.
I've noticed how the Scots are very efficient in their choice of names. So they've got an Alloway and they've got a Galloway. So they just, we'll add a letter, that will make another place name.
Yeah, if it ain't broke and all that. Also confuses tourists, so...
well, yes, there is that. But, help us here. Because, Rabbi Burns, as you call him out there.
No, we don't. We really don't. That's what people think we call him, but we don't.
Oh, well, there you go. So this is something you all only pretend to call him to confuse the tourists. The same thing with Alloway and Galloway. But, other than Auld Lang Syne, where are we here with Burns?
Well, I know Rubber knows a bit of Burns. Other than that,
we were talking about this last night. I did a Burns night a few years ago. I really enjoyed it, but we all had to read out a poem, and I chose one that Burns wrote called "Cock Up Your Beaver."
Okay, yes. Wee timorous beastie, is it?
No, that's not. I refuse to read that
I know.
one. It's so twee. But but cock up your beaver. It's about being happy in all circumstances by wearing your hat. It was like a beaver skin hat at a jaunty angle. So I think also cock was putting a feather into your. So you put a feather into your beaver skin hat, wear it at a jaunty angle to show, you're chilled. Nothing's going to get you down.
I see. I don't know what to say to that. Yes, it's something that sounds very promising given modern usage of language. And then, yes, it refers to a hat. But yes, there we are. But yes, I mean, I was sort of ready to stand back and let Tales just rail us into sort of
After
down
talking
the
about cock up your
highway.
beaver, let's not talk about railing.
Burns! Oh, here we go, the national hero.
Well,
but yes,
I mean, I can go on in a little bit more detail. Considering that I think was it the Herald? I think the Scottish Herald posted an article where there was some Burns Day kind of poetry session thing going on, where they basically paid. I think it was the Scottish Poetry Library or something like that. Paid a few women to write some poems about the way that women are treated in Burns's poems. Yeah.
Oh dear God.
Oh yes, exactly, and it's everything you'd expect it to be, because Burns kind of causes a bit of a problem for the likes of the SNP, who on one hand will go, Rabbie Burns, blah 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 blah, all that kind of stuff, when actually he was a royalist. He was a fan of the Union, and was at one point a tax collector, an exciseman, and he waded into the Solway Firth with a brandishing a cutlass at these smugglers, and it was by the name of the king, it was all that kind of stuff. And he wrote he didn't just write poems, he wrote songs, and he wrote prose as well.
But
quite
by the
often
sound of it, he
actually
also said politically incorrect stuff regarding women, did he?
Well, yeah, I mean, cock up your beaver aside, it was different times, man. People.
Yes, indeed. But obviously now causing a major problem. And this is news to me. I didn't know that. But obviously the super woke SNP would have a massive problem with that. But at the same time, they wish to drape themselves in the saltire and everything Scottish. So Burns is seen as this great, heroic, poetic figure. So yes, they're somewhat conflicted, you say.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough of Burns's work and about it, because he did. There was a famous line from one of his poems, I think it was, where it says "bought and sold for English gold," where he was talking about how obviously one of the main reasons that Scotland and England united into the United Kingdom was because Scotland was broke after the Darien scheme, which I've just done a video on, by the way, on my second channel. Just saying, just check it.
There you go, people. If you want to know more about the Darien scheme in Panama.
Yes. So he did. I don't know if, because that's a very easy thing to sort of take out of context and go, well, see, he's obviously saying it with disdain, but actually I don't really know what the context is.
His disdain may more have been towards the people who took the money rather than the ones who were actually giving it.
Quite, yeah. The Scots, who actually took all that money and went, yep, well, we don't really care, as long as we get our money back and then some. But he writes poems about the usual kind of harlotry and stuff that went on at the time. He was a top shagger, basically. Let's not beat around the bush.
Well, there you go. So a proper man's man.
Yes. Yeah, he liked to drink, and he liked to be a bit of a womanizer, and he did marry and stuff like that. But he did write some sort of far more gentle kind of poems as well. I mean, A Red Red Rose is one of his, and in Scotland anyway, because somebody was asking, I think it was somebody on my Discord was asking me, what in Scotland, do you do Shakespeare, and do you do Burns, and what are the differences sort of there? And I was basically like, well, when we were in primary school, from about primary 3 to 7, so about ages 7 to 11, we were forced to do Burns poetry every year in a competition and then sort of the best ones from each class would go through to like a regional competition and all that kind of thing, where you'd the winning school would end up with a commemorative quaich, which is a whiskey drinking dish. Strange thing to give to a bunch of children.
I was
but
just thinking,
Scotland,
to give
after
some
all.
primary school kids a whiskey drinking dish.
It's fine. It's ceremonial. It's not actually used for that purpose. But then, we didn't. I never did anything Shakespeare related until I was in S3 or 4, so age 14 or 15, and I think we did. We briefly looked at Julius Caesar, and that was it. Didn't know anything about the guy, anything about his history, anything else, no idea. But that's
it's only the language you speak. Yes. But yes, given that we're on things poetic and flight of fancy and whatever, I thought this might be a good moment to do a segue to another year that also has a memorable 25th of January. Namely, it's the year 1971. 25th of January 1971 was when Idi Amin deposed the Ugandan president Milton Obote. And of course, there is only one reason why I have selected this particular date, and that is so that I can remind you all of the full title of President Idi Amin.
Right, I'm just going to get a beer. I'll be.
Which is His Excellency, President for Life, Field Marshal Al-Haji Dr. Idi Amin Dada, VC, DCO, MC, CBE, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the seas, and conqueror of the British Empire in Africa in general and Uganda in particular. Yes, that's almost worthy of Robbie Burns, isn't it?
I was going to say, you just need a DJ at the front of all that, and then you'd have the full set.
But he also claimed to be the King of Scotland.
The last King of Scotland. Yeah. Yes. Which of course was the title of the film, wasn't it?
Yes.
What was he called? What's the actor called who
James
played
McAvoy?
James McAvoy, yeah.
He played the Scottish doctor.
I'm talking the guy who actually played Idi Amin.
Forrest Whitaker.
That's the one, because he got the Oscar for it, didn't he?
He did, and it's uncanny, his performance in it, because you get the undoubtedly charismatic figure who just draws everybody to him, but you get the psychopath as well. The thing about Idi Amin is that he was one of my childhood bogeymen. I was scared stiff of a few people in the 70s growing up. I was convinced that Idi Amin or the Baader Meinhof gang were going to get me. It was. No, I'm being serious.
I'm sorry I'm laughing here at your childhood trauma, but it's so specific. Idi Amin or the Baader Meinhof gang.
Well, there's two extremes, but the thing is that it was just the pervasiveness of the news media at the time.
Yeah.
I was also scared of Fanny Craddock growing up, but I didn't think she was going to get me.
Okay, it's an odd fear to have.
But Idi Amin was just like this, and he was a bogeyman for loads of people at school. And I remember in the late 70s, just before his fall, all the rumors started coming out, that he was a cannibal. And this used to go around in schools, the urban myths would start, like, he sends agents, white slavers in London, kidnap school children and ship them out to Uganda so Idi Amin can eat them. And you're about an 8, 9-year-old told that white slavers are going to
better behave, or Idi Amin slavers are going to come and get you.
Yeah. It's and it wasn't. Actually, it was only partly an urban myth, because yes, he did. He was a cannibal, and
he was completely off his rocker. By the time he fell, and all this stuff came out, it was just staggering. I mean,
he was keeping his ex-wives in a fridge.
Yes. Yeah.
Where else are you going to keep them? It should be noted that the Last King of Scotland book.
But anyway, we've covered Idi Amin in all his glory. So yes, we have got one particular day, which is the 29th of January, and in this case, it's 1942, which was the first time Desert Island Discs was first broadcast by the BBC. So I thought I would suggest to the panel earlier today that they should try and do a Desert Island Discs, as in the rules, if I've read them up correctly, are that you try and select 8 recordings and a book and a luxury item that you could take to a, if you were a castaway on a desert island somewhere in the middle of the Pacific. So you've got 8 recordings that you can listen to, a book, and 1 luxury item. So it doesn't need, it's not a necessity, not like matches or something like that. It's kind of given that you would go for those things, but just a luxury item, a frivolous luxury. So, gentlemen, have we any suggestions here? Does anybody want to sort of take the plunge and give us his selection?
I'm quickly writing it up right now.
Likewise. Fill in. You have you got your list, Britisher? I
have, yes. So shall I just do my monologue here, and meanwhile you two are frantically trying to compile something, are you?
I've got it in my head, but no.
Okay, I'll just start off here, shall I? So 8 recordings. This is, I think everyone will agree, 8 recordings is absolutely brutal. So I went my first choice, and Mr. Will Guitar, if you're still out there, you will know what's about to come here. My first choice is There Is Always One More Time by B.B. King, which, for anybody who's not actually heard this thing, folks, it's sensational. I rank B.B. King, and no doubt Tailed will be choking on his tea that is more than happy still there. When I say this, I rank B.B. King as pretty much the greatest musician of the 20th century. It's staggering. That particular song, There Is Always One More Time, is not actually one of his as such. It's a cover. I think it was done in the 1990s, but it's just mind-bending. Here is someone who is just able to have a connection directly with people's souls. And I think at the end, there must be something like a 3 or 4 minute guitar solo. And it's not something like Clapton or whatever, just going completely berserk. There isn't a single note too many in it. And it's the master holding court, and it's fantastic. Many of you out there will perhaps have heard of B.B. King, but you will most likely have seen him, when he was pretty old, in his sort of final years. And I think it's fair to say with most musicians, when they grow very old, they lose a bit of some of that sort of prowess. Whereas at that point, B.B. King was just fully there, and here you were just listening to an incomparable talent. So that's number 1. The second one, which I think is apt, given that I'm stuck on an island, is Queen, Who Wants to Live Forever, which everybody will know is part of the Queen soundtrack for my favorite film. So it would be a good way of reminding myself of a great film that I also like. So it's a great song. It seems apt for the occasion, and it also is connected to my favorite film. Then we've got In the Upper Room by Mahalia Jackson, because I like gospel music. As no doubt some of you will have clocked when over Christmas, in order to do something Christmassy, I uploaded a B.B. King gospel, which I felt more than likely most of you will never have heard that one. I mean, he's known as a blues singer, but he was able to do just about anything, and so he just wrote himself a gospel song and performed it. So I thought that was worth hearing. Then we get a bit classical. So I've got Luciano Pavarotti singing Nessun Dorma, which I think needs no further introduction. I've got Andrea Bocelli singing Conte Partirò. Then this one will maybe be news to some people. I've once in a while I've sort of tweeted it out. It's a singer called Tommy Körberg or Körberg. I believe he's Swedish, and he sung this song for the musical Chess that was actually written by the two blokes from ABBA. I think it was when the two ladies decided they wanted solo careers that went nowhere. These two chaps got together instead and wrote a musical. And the song is just called Anthem. And once again, it's mind-blowing. And it's more than likely, once again, one of those songs that, unless you're in the absolute top echelon of singers, you don't even attempt because it will break you. Then we've got Ella Fitzgerald singing Summertime. Again, absolute classic that I adore. And finally, sort of surprise joker in the pack, we have got Addicted to Love, but not the Robert Palmer version. I love the Robert Palmer version, but the Tina Turner version is even better. Although it doesn't have the video. And I mean, kudos for the video. It's fantastic. I love it. Anybody who went through the 80s will never, ever forget the Robert Palmer Addicted to Love video. Then, as for the book, I went with a surprise choice because, as people will know, I'm a bit of an atheist. But I went, if I can only take one book with me, I will take the Bible, because it's, how shall we say, it's deep. And most atheists won't admit this, but just as Christians can, how shall we say, falter in their beliefs, so too can atheists. So it is, you have your moments of weakness where you go, it could be. And you find yourself talking to the sky very much in the same manner as, say, Topol would in Fiddler on the Rooftop. Yeah. I mean, there's a fantastic line in that particular film in which, once again something has gone wrong, and he looks at the sky and he goes, "Lord, I know we are the chosen people, but couldn't you just once choose someone else?" Yeah. It's that level of conversation that I might have with the Lord at times, whether he's there or not. And therefore, yes, the Bible, I've got the feeling it's sort of 50 different books wrapped into one.
Well, you could spend years just going over it, and then when
precisely.
You get to the end, you go back
there are that many different aspects and meanings, and there's that much depth to it. Plus, of course, it is also one of the foremost works of the English language, so it is also beautiful.
Oh, you're going to get the King James version?
Yes. And then of course, then we come to the last choice. I stress, it says here, 8 recordings, a book, and a luxury item. And I know I'm going to be accused of cheating here, but I wish to point out that I am old-fashioned. I am often told that I'm sexist, some old sexist dinosaur. So the luxury item of choice, if I would get my first pick, would simply be a woman. But
Scarlett Johansson. We've long had a candle for her.
If that is nonetheless overruled, then I would instead go for a life supply of tea.
But you don't have the glass bottles being delivered.
Well, there is that. I would have to do tea without milk. But if it's very good tea, but only if it's very good tea. You can do that. Again, this is not a paid sponsorship. I'm just saying, Rington's Gold you can drink without milk. So yes, it's that would be my selection. So who wants to be next?
I'm ready.
Okay, Rubber. Eight recordings, a book, and a luxury item. And Scarlett Johansson is already taken.
Yeah, Scarlett. So I'll go with the music first. And I like my music a little bit on the complicated side. So I've chosen tracks that I don't think will ever bore me. So my top one is really the album that changed the way I listen to music, and that's Close to the Edge by Yes. It's an album. It's 45 minutes long. There's only 3 songs on it. But this is when the
you've
band
found a way of filling time, haven't you? Yes.
And what happens is that this is the band when it kind of reaches its peak lineup. So it's John Anderson with that strange voice that he has. It's half American, half Lancashire, and quite high pitched, but absolutely, it soars. He's just got this amazing voice. He got Steve Howe on guitar, Rick Wakeman on keyboard, Bill Bruford on drums, Chris Squire on bass, and that's just this ultimate lineup. And when I first heard that, I'm very used to songs being about 3 minutes long and very structured. And Close to the Edge is it feels like a cavalry charge on vinyl. It's just absolutely. It's absolutely jaw-dropping, and the production on it is amazing. So that's my first choice. And then I'm going to go with a couple of classical pieces, but again, ones that I think kind of do some very interesting things. So the first one is Beethoven's Egmont. I'm just a huge fan of Beethoven. He's my all-time favorite classical composer. And the Egmont Overture, I remember hearing it in music lesson when I was at school and just being taken aback by the whole sound of it. What I learned later was that Beethoven had just kind of mastered modulation, the art of changing keys almost seamlessly on you. And it's fantastic for that reason. It's just a great orchestral piece. And then Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto in D. And I want to record it with either Janine Jansen or Maxim Vengerov doing it, because it's basically Tchaikovsky writing a violin concerto, but preempting kind of Jimi Hendrix on guitar. What the violin goes through in that piece of music is it's akin to torture at times, but then it soars. It's beautiful. It's very, very complex piece, and I really like that.
I'm with you on Vengerov. I think Vengerov is something else. It's unbelievable. Yes.
And then for my fourth choice, I've gone for KPM Library Music Volume 4. So I'm a big fan of stock library jazz. It's kind of like you had all these jazz musicians and composers, and gigging on the jazz circuit doesn't bring a lot of money in, but composing stock music for TV programs or radio shows, and there's hundreds or thousands of hours of all this, what I would call porn jazz or cop jazz. You would know it if you heard it. It's the kind of music that generic jazz music that plays when a 70s cop like Dirty Harry walks into a nightclub. Or it's like, I have come to fix your photocopier. This kind of music. Lots of Hammond organ and all that. And KPM Volume 4, I think, has the theme from Grandstand, the music from Dave Allen at Large, because these were all library music just chosen by the producer because they thought, that would sound interesting. So it's all the anthems of my childhood on one record. And so I'd take that. No, Take That's not on my list at all.
I was going to say, you're only allowed a song from that album. You're not allowed the whole album.
Oh, right. I'd probably choose a track by Keith Mansfield called Exclusive Blend, which was the Dave Allen at Large music. So number 5 is Stairway
sounds like
to
a
Heaven.
Cigarette, doesn't it? Exclusive Blend.
Well, it could be coffee, it could be tobacco. Who knows?
It's true. Yes.
But Stairway to Heaven, Led Zeppelin. Again, it's one of those songs, I think, when I first heard it, I actually stopped what I was doing just to listen to it. If it was, a lot of pop songs just play in the background and go, oh, that's nice. But Stairway to Heaven is just one of those, whoa, I'm just going to stop what I'm doing and take, 7 minutes, is it? Just out of my life, just to listen to it. And
Closer to 9, I think.
yeah, well, 9. But it's the way it goes from the most gentle of beginnings to full on Zeppelin by the end. Just shows the range the band had. That's incredible. Wonderful lyrics as well. Still don't know what they mean, but it sounds great. And then I go with Strawberry Fields Forever by the Beatles. Just my favorite one that they did. Again, it was complicated to record. It's probably why I like it. It does different things. It's interesting. And then because on those nights where you get a bit lonely and maybe a bit mad from being on your own on a desert island, I've gone with Starless and Bible Black by King Crimson.
Oh, nice.
Just absolute. It's a full-on assault, by guys who are at their peak. Just, yeah.
Another Bill Bruford one as well.
That's another Bill Bruford, yeah. And then I'm going with the last one just to calm me down after going through King Crimson, and that is Oxygene by Jean-Michel Jarre. All that multi-layered synth.
Part 4.
Part 4, of course, yeah. And then because the individual tracks, but I just something that would soothe me there. So that's my 8 songs. The book, because apparently you get the Bible anyway, and you get the complete works of Shakespeare.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I want fun now. So the book I've chosen, not the complete Pirelli calendar guidebook, which would have been, but I've gone with one of my favorite novels called Carter Beats the Devil by Glenn David Gould. I think I've read it 4 times, and each time it's amazing the way it's constructed. So it's about a 1920s stage magician who may or may not have killed President Warren Harding of the United States. And the whole book is trying to figure out who this guy Carter is and what his involvement was and all these nefarious schemes. And it's also hilariously funny as well. It covers everything from the invention of the television set to the first BMW motorbikes put on the market. And yeah, it's just I love it. It's so entertaining, that book. I thoroughly recommend it to anybody. So that would keep me going. And my luxury item, I'm in agreement, Britisher, but I've gone with something that would, again, I need to keep my mental faculties sharp on this desert island. So I've opted for a board war game called Advanced Squad Leader. Now, I own a lot of Advanced Squad Leader, and the rule book itself is so thick. It's about the thickness of a shoebox. And I just thought, I'm going to spend years trying to figure out how to play this thing. And that's the thing, I don't know how long I'm going to be there. I don't want anything that I'm going to get bored with quickly.
Is it something you can play with yourself?
Yes, there is a solo mod. There's rules that you can adapt it for solo play. So
okay, yeah. I mean, otherwise you go bananas because you don't have an opponent, if you know what I mean.
Oh no, but I would adopt the persona. If I'm going mad, I would adopt the persona of some German or Russian commander.
A bit like Tom Hanks when he's on the desert island. He's got the Coconut Man, doesn't he?
The Coconut Man and Wilson the basketball. But I might even, I could imagine myself being like the dotty old English lady in Dinner for One, who's just got.
When it comes to jazz musicians, have you heard of David Sanborn?
No, I haven't.
I knew someone once who was absolutely crazy about him, and he sort of introduced me to him. It was sort of, I say introduced me, I mean introduced me to the music as opposed to David Sanborn. But he was sort of a 1980s jazz saxophonist, and really, truly astonishing stuff. I must admit that this guy did manage to get me quite hooked on this guy. That it's as you say, it's stuff that you can listen to in the background, and it goes on forever and ever, and it just sort of drifts, and it's phenomenal. But it's not as if you've got a tune you can kind of whistle afterwards, if you know what I mean. But yeah, astonishingly talented guy. But yeah, I just thought if that's kind of your thing, David Sanborn might be a name worth checking out.
Okay.
So yes, then we're left with tailed features, and now we come to the musician's pick of musicians. So now we really expect something astonishing. But first, I would just like to remind the audience just how hard this is to reduce what you like down to 8 picks, because it's nigh on impossible. So please, Tails, take it away.
Well, with that in mind, Ask Me Tomorrow. This list will be completely different. I think I've kind of gone for more probably more like Rubber's list than yours, but I think there's enough sort of variation in here for my liking anyway. So the first tune that I would bring is it's a Black Sabbath song. It's the last song on their third album, Master of Reality. The song's called Into the Void. It just had such a profound effect on me as a 12-year-old when I first heard it. It was like the musical equivalent of being punched in the gut. I just thought, oh, what? Because I'd only been listening. I'd listened to a lot of sort of pop music and just what was in the charts.
So that's when your corruption began.
Exactly, yeah. I was a big fan of Queen, and I was tempted to be really wide and just say I've just picked 8 songs off of Erasure's greatest hits, but I decided I wouldn't do that. Even though they're all bangers, I would be quite happy with that, to be honest.
If Walking 500 Miles is not in your selection of 8, then of course we're all going to be dreadfully disappointed. You are aware of that.
Prepare for disappointment. I despise that song, if only because I'm a wedding musician, and every gig, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even need to be a wedding. It's every pub gig, just every wedding. Absolutely.
So it's not so much the song itself; it's the connotation of the song that you're sick and you're sick of being asked for the same thing over and over. But as such, it's a decent song.
Well, I mean, it's fine. It definitely wouldn't be on any day. It would not be on my list of songs. I prefer.
Are we willing to bet that if the dear leader of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, were ever asked to go on Desert Island Discs, that would definitely be her top selection?
They've done more political songs, so it'd probably be one of them. I mean, even Letter from America is kind of political, so I think they should probably choose something like that.
I see.
Yes, but they've done.
But you understand what I mean? It's the same thing like with Robert Burns. It's got this all Scottish connotation. So therefore, by publicly embracing it, you are playing your part.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes, but I think even she would go 500 miles, which is actually, it's not actually called 500 miles. It's called I'm Going to Be.
Yes.
I think even she would probably go, that's a little bit twee. Even Sturgeon, I think, would.
Too twee for Sturgeon. Yes.
Yes.
Speaking of kind of wedding bands and things, it was Bill Bailey, I think, put Lady in Red by Krista Berg in Room 101 because when he was doing weddings and sort of private party gigs, that was always requested for him, and he grew to hate the song because of the familiarity.
If I'm not mistaken, it was also the fact that Krista Berg had the audacity to rhyme dance with romance.
Yes, he does a Cockney version of Lady in Red as he's wont to do, and he's like, he properly emphasizes the dance and romance in that one very much so.
Yeah.
With through gritted teeth, you can tell he's actually spitting these words out.
The Berg's a public school boy, and he went to Marlborough College, and in the late, I think mid-60s, he was at Marlborough College with another young man who would go on to become a professional musician. and apparently they hated each other at school. And that other musician was Nick Drake. And I can't think of two more polar opposites in terms of musical style than Nick Drake and Chris de Burgh. But de Burgh auditioned to be in Nick Drake's school band, and Drake just said, "No, I'm not having it. No."
Probably a wise decision.
Okay, so we were with Black Sabbath.
We were with Black Sabbath.
Yes. So please go on, Tails. Yes.
So along the same lines of Rob, I've chosen a long track for the next one, which is that well-known hit by Emerson, Lake and Palmer called Tarkus, which is just over the 20-minute mark as a full side of an LP. And again, it's something I heard when I was 13 or something like that. And the first thing I thought was, what the hell is this? You know, again, just been listening to pop music and all that kind of thing. And then suddenly hearing this, it's just absolutely insane, really sort of heavy piano sounds and Hammond organ and the synthesizer and the mad drumming, time signatures changing sort of every 5 seconds and all that kind of thing. It was a real tour de force, just absolutely bizarre. And it's kind of what got me interested in sort of playing music. I already played a bit of piano and stuff at the time, but I just thought I need to take this apart and see what makes it tick. Why? How can you write something like this? Because I, as I say, was mostly familiar with the 3-minute pop song at that point. So when I got into Sabbath, it was 6-minute song, that kind of thing, but fairly standard kind of song structures. Whereas this was just absolutely bonkers, and I still love it, even though I know everything that's about to come because I've listened to it that many times. It still surprises me in a way. So that's my next one. Staying on the sort of 70s theme, next one would be a song called Stargazer by Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. Last night on Streaming Robert, we were talking about Ronnie James Dio.
Robert, have you got your thing open or whatever? Because we seem to be having an echo from Tails.
Yeah, you don't want to hear me.
No, I've just got the inbuilt mic on.
No, you want to continue, Tails, and we'll see if it comes again.
I'll tell you what. I'll mute for a little bit.
Okay, doke.
But to answer your question, Tails, yes.
Okay, right. I don't remember asking a question, but good to know. We were talking about Ronnie James Dio, and to me, that this is his best, most heartfelt performance. I love it. Again, it's a really long song. It's 8 or 9 minutes or something like that. It's kind of cheesy because it's he's singing about wizards and all that kind of stuff, but the orchestration in it, because it's got a string section and it's got mellotron and all sorts of things going on in it, so it's a very atmospheric track. That's basically why I chose that one. Again, staying in the 70s, I'm noticing a pattern here. A song called, maybe Mr. Roll Guitar will know this, I don't know. A song called Mediterranean Sundance by Al Di Meola, featuring John McLaughlin. Not John McLaughlin on this one. It's Paco de Lucia on this one. Again, it's just 2 acoustic guitars, one a nylon string, one a steel string, and these guys are just jamming this kind of sort of jazz fusion-y kind of Spanish guitar sort of stuff, and it's just incredible musicianship. Just 2 guys just playing the guitar, absolutely shredding away on it, and it just makes me smile every time I hear it. Still sticking with the 70s. Since Robert chose Starless and Bible Black, which I had that on my list as well. I'm choosing the last track from the album Starless and Bible Black, which is called Fracture, which again is about 12 minutes or something like that, and is the most bizarre kind of sounding it's not even a riff at the beginning. Well, it technically is a riff because it repeats, but it's a very angular, very it's a diminished scale if anyone cares. That's just used in it. And again, first time I heard that, I just thought, what the hell is this? And yeah, it's very, very it's very, it sort of puts you on edge a little bit, I find, but I just really like it. So that's that one. Changing decade slightly, I'm going to choose Crossroads by Cream, live version, which appeared on one of their greatest hits, just because it's three guys at the top of their game, just jamming away, and it's just one of those live performances that just sets the hairs on my neck up. It's just absolutely fantastic. Just excellent musicianship, and it's not, you know, the most amazing playing in the world, but it's just one of those things that when a group of musicians get it right, you know, everything sort of comes together and it just sounds absolutely excellent. It's a really good recording for the time as well. I think it was recorded in 67 or 68 or something like that. The guys are just on fire, and yeah, it just works absolutely perfectly. Then sudden gear change. I'm going to choose Symphony 4, Movement 4 by Brahms.
That is a sudden gear change, yes.
It is a sudden gear change, yeah.
There was I expecting you were suddenly going to go into Kylie Minogue territory, but Brahms it is, yes.
Brahms it is, yes. That's probably my favourite piece of his. It's, even though it's, I mean, unless it's because I like riffs. I like so a riff is essentially a repeated idea. I like sort of heavy sounding riffs that sort of weigh on your shoulders. Hence why I like Black Sabbath and all that kind of thing. I suppose this is Brahms' equivalent, because the whole movement is based on what's called a ground bass, which is just a repeated idea just the whole time, and it's actually a very simple one, but it's very sort of brooding, and you know, it's played in different ways. You know, one moment it's the bass instruments that are playing it, very sort of heavy and very brooding and everything, and then it gets really light in the middle because it's being played by the upper strings and all that kind of thing, and then it all just descends into crescendos at the very end, and it's just a very, very nice piece. I just like that. It's got a lot in it to keep me interested. And then the last one is a track by Elbow. I used to really, really like Elbow. They're kind of a bit boring, to be honest with you now. I think they're one of those bands that I listened to a lot and then kind of got bored of them. But they did a performance of a song from their 2008 album, The Seldom Seen Kid. They did a song from that called The Loneliness of a Tower Crane Driver. They performed that live at Abbey Road with the, I can't remember which orchestra it was. I don't know if it was BBC Symphony or Philharmonic or whatever it was. But so the studio version it's all right. It's got some. They didn't have an orchestra or anything like that, so they've kind of got strings, digital strings and stuff like that on it, and it's still quite epic, especially towards kind of the sort of the crescendo of the whole piece. But in the live version, they've got a full orchestra and choir behind them, and just the section where the crescendo is reached, man, it just, cock up the beaver. It's just absolutely incredible every single time. Hairs on the back of my neck. Sometimes will genuinely have tears in my eyes. And it's not because it's sad; it's because there's just something so powerful about it. And just for that moment, I'm going to stick that tune in there, and that's my 8 songs.
Well, I think everyone will find it absolutely astonishing that in all the 24 selections that have been made, there isn't a single rap to be seen.
No.
Well, I mean,
likely to be seen.
So in that case, we've still got your book and the luxury item.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I was considering putting "Baby Got Back" by Sir Mix-a-Lot in there, but I decided against it at the last minute. So my book, again, it's actually the first book that popped in my head when I thought of this. And it's a very niche thing. It's for nostalgic reasons, really. It's a book called The Cone Gatherers by Robin Jenkins. And it was a book that I was forced to read at school when I was doing higher English. So that's A level to use. And the first, because I sat English twice, because believe it or not, I wasn't very good at English because I'm Scottish. Actually, the first time I sat it, I got a C at higher level, and I needed a B to get into the university I wanted to get into. So I did it again, basically, and I got luck of the draw. I got the same teacher. It was the same text that I had to do, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm gonna have to read this book again." Because the first time I read it, I thought it was completely awful, and I just didn't get. She was saying, the teacher was saying, "Oh, of course, the job that the two guys in the book, they're literally gathering pine cones. It was to help the war effort, and they have a bit of an issue with the local gamekeeper, because the whole thing takes part on a country estate, and there's kind of class issues brought into it because the lady of the house, she's still there because the lord of the manor or whatever, he's away fighting. So the lady's still there. Then you've got the gamekeeper, and then you've got these two guys that gather the cones, and they live in just in a little hut somewhere because they've just been basically put there by the government, saying, right, this is your job. You're gonna you're gonna climb these trees and collect pine cones for us. And yeah, it's actually incredibly dull as it sounds. It is, but first time I read it, I didn't get any of the nuance in it whatsoever. And because my teacher was saying, "Oh, the whole thing is a microcosm for the war and all this kind of stuff," and I was like, "What the fuck are you talking about, women?" I just didn't understand what it was that they were trying to get at. And then the next year, I actually thought, right, I'm going to read it before the year starts. I thought, right, I'm going to get this out of the way. So I'm just going to, it's summer holidays, I'm just going to sit and I'm going to read it. And I did. And it was like, I don't know, like a veil had been lifted. And suddenly I was like, oh, I get this now. There was something, I don't know what happened, but suddenly I understood it. And suddenly I understood, not just with that book, but we had to dissect poetry and all these different kinds of things, and I just understood it all. And so that book had a sort of monumental kind of effect on me. I've probably not read it for at least 15 years, I would say. I think I've only read it once or twice since leaving school, and I left school in 2004. So actually, yeah, it's closer to 20 years now, I suppose. But yeah, that would be the book that I would choose. I don't really care about having the Bible and Shakespeare with me. I probably wouldn't even touch them, to be honest. Unless I got really bored, I suppose. But yeah, that would be my choice of book. So a little bit niche, a little bit random there, but yeah, that would be it for me.
Well, you see, when you said the Cone Collector, to me that immediately sounded like some manual for a policy of John Major's.
Oh, I see. Well, when I first read the title, I thought, what, traffic cones? What?
So yes, anybody who didn't get that, yes, there was the famous Tory policy under John Major of the cone, the National Cone Hotline, which, how should we say, it wasn't the greatest policy proposal the Tories ever came up with.
No, probably not.
But yes, so then we have your luxury item.
Yes. So I'm in two minds about this. So either take a guitar, which is a bit obvious.
Yes, I think we could see that. Yes.
Yes. Or a lifetime supply of Tunnock's tea cakes.
Ah, I see.
Yes.
Yeah, the very British Tunnock's tea cakes, of course.
Yeah, well, if you were also there and you had your tea, then tea in a biscuit.
Precisely, yes, yeah. Or if I'm on the next island, we could have a bartering system going on.
We could, yeah. I'm assuming I'd have the tea cakes in some sort of crate, and you'd have the tea in crates, so we could,
we could float them across from island to island. Yes.
Yeah.
And if Rubber, he would just be on the third island with nothing to offer in that. So we could just exchange tea bags and Tunnocks tea cakes.
Oh well, I'd be roasting the guinea fowl, so you guys could come over to my third island, and we'll have kind of roast plantain and guinea fowl for dinner.
And unless, of course, my first choice of luxury item would be accepted. In that case, I don't want to know either of you anymore, and stay off my bloody island.
Yeah, we're not allowed to look at Scarlet on the other.
So then of course we've got one super chat that came in, and I'm sorry, Auto Chaff, I'm not sure what this refers to anymore, but it just says adopt the persona sounds more like you're doing a rimmer, which, to be fair, if you're going mad ... So we
Mr.
may
Flibble
have,
is very cross with you.
we may have missed the topicality of that. I don't know, but thank you anyway. As we speak, Keldrig has arrived. I'm afraid I don't have any witty and or cringy phrase to describe my American homeland today, so I shall simply offer my tribute without one. Well, that's how we like our Americans more than anything else. Silent.
Silent and generous with money. That's
precisely. One day I'm going to be shot for this. Then we have Mighty Balzac. Why were they collecting cones? So there you go. You fill in, Mighty Balzac, as I try and switch screens here.
All right. Okay. Yes. They were collecting cones, pine cones, so that they could plant more trees for the war effort. That's basically what it was. So obviously they needed lots of wood, so they were cutting down all the trees, but they were replanting them. Sustainable, I believe, is the word, the modern word. Also, just to say to Mr. Roll Guitar, a kilt wouldn't be my luxury item because I'd be wearing it when I got there already, and it would have to be the Feliag Mór, which is the big kilt, which is the one that wraps around you as well, because it's a very useful item to, you can sleep under it, you can do all sorts of things with it, rather than
always depending on how cold it gets on our
desert island. At night it would probably, the temperature would drop somewhat.
I mean, if you're if we're sort of talking Skara Brae here, then you more than likely have made the correct choice.
Yes.
If we're somewhere on Tahiti or whatever, then maybe it won't come in to too much use.
Well, no. If not, then it's nice. Instead of a pair of shorts, it's quite breezy.
And then I just want to address, because I see the Vixter is in the chat, and I do expect some credit here for having chosen "Who Wants to Live Forever" by Queen as one of my 8. So I do expect to now be the champion of champions in musical selection here among this panel. I will wait for the accolades to come later on Twitter, Victor. But anyway, it's sort of that time-ish again. It's past, so I thought we would move on to the Bentley Speed 6 section of the well, it isn't a contest, but I was about to say contest. And that is yes, what historical event or what historical personage you would like to go and see with the time machine and take us with you. So do either of you want to go first, or are we in the same situation as we were with the Desert Island Discs section, that you still need to make something up and you wish me to go first?
Well, it's the latter for me. I don't know about Rubber.
I've got a person we can
Okay,
bring.
yeah, Robert, go on.
So I recently learned about the life of an extraordinary gentleman called William Lever, the first Viscount Leverhulme, founder of Unilever. So an absolutely fascinating chap. He kind of like, his life stretches from the Victorian era through to the Edwardians. He died in 1925 in his 70s. But he is that classic example of a self-made Victorian entrepreneur who becomes fabulously wealthy, redefining both manufacturing and retail, and then plowing his wealth into what he considers to be virtuous causes and patronage and things of that ilk. And he did start off working, I think, for his dad's grocery firm, just a small modest business, and then he goes on to, as a young man in his early 20s, to start up his own business. And his original thing was making soap, but it's not just getting people in the 1870s to buy his soap. He has to get them to use the soap in the first place. The soap usually was soap was usually a homemade product, so he in line with the kind of the whole building of the embankment and clean water and getting rid of the cholera, he kind of jumps onto that bandwagon and just says, why not take a bath once a week and use my product? But also soap was sold in these massive slabs, and people would cut them at home. You know, they would use like something like a cheese wire to cut soap from these massive blocks into something usable, usually just for one wash. But then Lever just got the idea of pre-slicing them and putting them into little cardboard boxes, and that's where we get the soap bar today. And he sounds interesting because he's one of these chaps that comes along, doesn't really invent anything, but he just revolutionizes the process.
Yep.
So he revolutionizes hygiene and retail and the concept of selling something that's in an easily managed format. So, you know, that's something that, you know, you have it in a size that can fit into a shopping bag.
It makes it convenient.
Yes, very much the convenience aspect of it. And then he's one of these people that then goes and builds new towns and kind of good quality housing, much like in Bourneville. With the Cadbury's chocolate, he's along the same lines. He's building good quality housing for his employees, and then he then in the Edwardian times he gets a chance to take over a failing enterprise in West Africa and also in the Pacific, and so he starts taking over palm oil plantations. And I think it's also in the time when the Belgian African Empire was waning. It was, I think it was Belgium was notoriously committed the worst atrocities of any colonial power in the Victorian Edwardian eras. And Leverhulme goes into what would now be the Congo and just sees the terrible conditions. He says, no, I'm going to plow my money into building schools, you know, not mistreating the locals, actually paying the locals a wage to harvest palm oil and things. And, you know, this was considered quite radical at the time. And then, but his personality was that he was always convinced whatever he did, he was right. And along with some very good ideas, he had some barking ones as well. He was convinced that people should sleep outdoors. So he had this massive mansion built, and the bedroom had no roof. And unsurprisingly, in the 1920s, both his wife and he died of pneumonia. in bed. Who'd have thought? Yeah.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
he sounds like a real character, and one of these people that made. He's one of these people that I think, warts and all, we were richer for his presence in our history.
Can I ask, given that you mentioned palm oil, is
Hmm.
Palmolive one of his brands?
Yes.
Oh, so there you go. There you've got the connection, ladies and gentlemen. So it's Palmolive. Goes back to Mister. What is it? Viscount Leverhulme, is it?
Viscount Leverhulme. Yes.
Or as the Americans would mispronounce it, no doubt, Viscount Leverhulme.
Yeah, and the other thing is that Unilever is still a family-run company, so it's his great-grandchildren who run it today.
I didn't know that. It's terrifying, isn't it, when you hear of some of these giant, these colossal companies that is still. I mean, I heard once that, what was it, Hoffmann La Roche. I think these days they're just called La Roche, or Roche. I think these days they're a major giant in pharmaceuticals. And I believe the Hoffman family still have a significant share in it. And you hear these things and you just go, how is this possible? But yes, it just sort of shows that as long as these corporations go on, these people are just going to be swimming in money for generations to come. But yes, there you go. So a barking mad soap entrepreneur. I quite like that. I mean, I think I mentioned this once before with soap, that it seemed to have been invented in the Levant. So it's sort of Syria. And the thing is still sold today. It's called Aleppo soap. And they make it in giant vats in Syria and then dry it. I think they also make it in the Lebanon. And it's named after that city that became this massive sort of war zone, Aleppo. It's the largest city in Syria. And then when the Crusaders got there, they then obviously saw soap and thought, well, this is handy. So they took it back with them. And the offshoot of that was Marseille soap and Castile soap. And I think quite a lot of soap for a long time in Britain was still referred to as Castile soap. And my assumption is simply that he looked at that and went, okay, how do we industrialize this? And then how do we sell it? As opposed to people doing it in their local villages and everybody gets a block. How do we actually prepare this and make it much more efficient and then have it in ready, convenient pieces for everybody and then ship it around like that? And yeah, it shows how what was actually an old product suddenly makes one guy phenomenally rich. And I guess the fact that they then also turned it into, dishwasher soap, or basically detergent for washing dishes in, and also detergent for clothes, took it one step further, didn't it?
Yes. Now that's the thing about leverage. So the idea of washing powder was that came from when they were making. So first of all, when they make the soap, they make it in these vats, and then it gets solidified into these huge slabs and then cut into the bars. But it would always leave these kind of shavings, so they were trying to make the soap bar smooth. So there was kind of the equivalent of sandpapering, and all these shavings would drop to the floor. And Leverhulme would look at it and say, well, what are we doing with this waste? And he said, well, it's just like flaky soap. Nobody can wash with it. And he said, but you can wash clothes in that. And so the idea of soap flakes, washing powder, came from, just the shavings off bars of soap. How could they make the waste product be useful?
Well, in the the ancients already knew about ammonia, and I know that the British Navy also used it, so that when you had to go and spend a penny in sort of the wooden ships of the fleet of Nelson and whatever, you wouldn't go over the side. You would do your number twos over the side, but you would spend your penny in a barrel below decks. And the reason you would do that is the ammonia would separate and sink to the bottom of the barrel. and at some point they would pour off the excess liquid and be left with pure ammonia. And then they would add seawater to that, boil it up, and then the clothes of all the crew got washed in it. So that's how they kept things like lice and whatever under control. So they had, ammonia was around as a natural detergent, but I could well imagine that it wouldn't be quite as pleasant as having Mr. Lever's shavings to wash your clothes like that.
Now, here's another connect. You mentioned the Navy. I'll just mention one last thing about this guy, which I find this quite interesting, is that the pre-Raphaelite painter, John Everett Millais, painted a picture called Bubbles, which is that this like a 4-year-old boy looking at a soap bubble flying past him. You know, it's this famous Millais painting. And Leverhulme bought it and then bought the rights to use that painting as the image on his packaging for the soap. And it was kind of the first time a piece of art was used for commercial purposes. I mean, so, yeah, he bought the rights from Millais, and nobody quite knew, okay, is this a thing now? Is this a thing that we commission or we get a famous artwork from a famous painter and we just pay them for the rights? And
so there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Now you know where Coca-Cola got their idea from with their Santa Claus.
Yeah, but the little boy in that painting, and this is the Navy connection, grew up to be a Royal Naval officer called William James. He was an admiral. I believe he served in both World War I and World War II. Quite a successful admiral. But he was the boy.
Quite a cross to bear, wouldn't it?
And his nickname in the service was Bubbles.
Bubbles, yes. It's like
in
Sharp with Sweet William.
48 show. There was a character in that, I think it was an undercover policeman, and they're all dressed up as women, and obviously it's like John Cleese, who's 6 foot, whatever.
Yeah, I'd like to be known as Bubbles.
Yeah, that one. It's like, do I have to be Doris, sir? What would you rather be? Bubbles.
And then we've got a super chat here from N's Beginning. I'd take you all to an early 19th century association football match in England, a 1900s association football match in England, where people call it soccer, just so I can point out that it's all your fault. It's football. I'm sorry. I don't care whether someone once in ancient times called it soccer. It's football, because the national sport in this country is football. And the Americans then running around in motorbike helmets in suspiciously tight pants whilst doing a lot of bending over. I'm sorry, that's not football. So anyway, yes, that set aside. Oh, we've got another one here. We've got Low for Sheffield. Leverhulme's bungalow in the Italian-Japanese-styled gardens near Rivington, Lancashire, was burned down by a suffragette. Bloody women. Well, there you go. Yes.
Well, they're terrorists, the suffragettes.
What more can we say? Yes. I mean, there was also that nutter who attacked the Rokeby Venus. So, yeah, she slashed the Rokeby Venus because she was a suffragette. And then I assume she was, prosecuted for it or whatever. And then later re-emerged as a fanatical Mosley devotee. So she went straight from fanatical suffragette to fanatical fascist, which, tells you everything about radicals you need to know. So, Tail, shall I jump in with my suggestion and like that, and give you a bit more time?
Well, I've got something. So
okay, go ahead. Yeah, just you leap in.
Now, again, as a person, excuse me. And earlier I alluded to, I was talking about the Darien scheme and all that kind of thing. So the guy behind that, I would quite like to meet him and just ask a simple question, which is why? not the. I mean, the idea of colonialism and stuff like that. Everybody was doing it at the time, and it's not like that. But just why the obsession with this one little sort of bay in Panama, in the middle of the Spanish Empire, surrounded by Spaniards and Portuguese. Because bear in mind that the Spanish had already set up a colony in Darien before they abandoned it because they'd struck gold in Panama City or wherever it was. So they abandoned it. And for some reason, this guy was like, "Yep, that's a good place to set up a trading port." Trading what exactly? Considering, you didn't take anything to, to make anything. So what? I just there's so many unanswered questions. But so the guy behind the whole thing is a guy called William Patterson, and he was born in Tynwald in Dumfriesshire, so southwest Scotland, in 1658. And he was one of the founders of the Bank of England. So you guys have got him to thank for that, I suppose.
So he had foam.
Yes. I mean, he seemed to be, a very prolific, merchant. He worked in the West Indies, doing various things over there, and he made a lot of money through the slave trade. So, so he was in the Merchant Tailors Company, so a lot of cotton and all that kind of thing going on. And yeah, while he was in the West Indies, he decided for some reason that he really wanted to set up this colony, this trading outpost in the middle of the Spanish Empire. It's almost like, well, everyone else has got colonies. Why shouldn't we? To be fair, Scotland had tried other ones that had also failed. Noticing a theme here, right? So he wasn't able to convince James II to give him the rights to do this. He tried elsewhere and all that kind of thing. But anyway, it wasn't like this was just a scheme that he thought up, of an evening and went, "Oh, that's a good idea." This went on for years. They spent years. Obviously, they'd set up a company. So they set up the Company of Scotland. Him and some other merchants and all that. They set up the Company of Scotland, and that was kind of the problem, was that pretty much everybody, the who's who of the Scottish aristocracy, and even merchants and lawyers and doctors, basically anyone who had any money, the middle classes as well, everybody piled all their liquid capital into this company, and then it failed. So that's kind of what bankrupted the company.
Yeah, it's what they called a milkmaid economy, when everyone down to the milkmaid is investing into stuff. It tends to give away the fact that people are not really quite aware of what they're investing in. And it's a classic sign of a bubble. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was so, what's the word? Hyperbolic. That's not really the word I'm looking for, but he was quite, what's the word? He had the gift of the gab. He had patter, he had banter, and all that kind of stuff. You could. One of his quotes attributed to him about setting up this this colony at Darien. He says, "Trade will increase trade, and money will beget money, and the trading world shall need no more to want work for their hands, but will rather want hands for their work. Thus, this door of the seas and the key of the universe, with anything of a sort of reasonable management, will, of course, enable its proprietors to give laws to both oceans without being liable to the fatigues, expenses of dangers, or contracting the guilt and blood of Alexander and Caesar." So
he definitely had a sort of epic tone, didn't he?
Yeah, and everyone just went, "Seems legit," and this guy knows what he's talking about, because he did have form. But obviously it didn't work.
I mean, I would be quite fascinated to talk to this guy, because I have a hunch I know why Darien. That is, first, Darien was known. it was known to the English-speaking world because Drake had stopped off at Darien. And obviously the tales of Drake were that was something that the British Isles knew about. And so much so, I think, because obviously Drake was the opponent of the Spaniards, and the local Indians, they didn't like the Spaniards either. So when Drake needed to land in that part of the world, the tribes and he got along with each other, which is, of course, different from landing and then intending to stay. So if you're landing and you're intending to fight the Spaniards who are giving the tribes a hard time, then the tribes are much more inclined to be friendly. I believe, I'm somewhere at the top of my mind, I think he gave a chieftain his sword. So if anybody ever finds Drake's sword somewhere in the Panamese jungle, it's going to be worth a lot of money. So that's why I think Darien would have been something that it had sort of this aspect of a legendary mythical land where, you know, the British at least had already set foot, if you know what I mean. And at the same time, of course, that part of the world was also known for dye wood. So sort of various woods that could help turn textiles blue and various other shades. So again, with the Scots being rather known for their wool trade and whatever, I could again imagine that would be seen as a sort of a natural fix, if you know what I mean. Except, of course, yes, it didn't really work, did it? It was the completely wrong part of the world. And it really seemed to have been set up by someone who was a bit of an adventurer, who, oh, well, let's give this a go. Which at the same time would make this guy a very interesting chap to talk to. But yes, I can't help the feeling that this was a guy who organized this venture, sort of, you know, fly by the seat of your pants and see what happens. Because in the end, okay, Scotland isn't the largest of nations, but to have poured the entire wealth of a country such as Scotland into such a project, and then only managed to sustain this tiny little colony for such short a time, you just do wonder, where did all the money go? So, you know, that would be an interesting chap to speak to. Yes, so thanks for that. And my suggestion, which I think is sort of topical, given that this is, Holocaust Memorial Week and that sort of thing, is a boxer. It's a German boxer. And it's Max Schmeling. So I don't know how familiar you two are with Max Schmeling. He was a
little bit. Didn't he fight? I'm trying to. But was it Joe Louis?
Joe Louis. He fought Joe Louis famously. Yes, he was shown some footage of Joe Louis fighting, and he said, you know, after watching this in quite a lot of detail, he said, I can beat this man, because he kind of, you know, analyzed the fighting style and said, I can knock this guy out. I can get him. And of course, he then did fight Joe Louis, and he did defeat him. But I think everyone would agree, and I think Max Schmeling would agree, that Joe Louis was the great fighter. He was the great one of the age. He was the Muhammad Ali of that time, if you know what I mean. So Joe Louis did come back, and he did beat. He beat the living daylights out of Max Schmeling the second time round. So it's almost as if Joe Louis realized, okay, he found a weakness of mine. Fine, we'll do away with this weakness, and now I'll clobber him. But what makes Max Schmeling so interesting is he was the man whom Hitler built up as the sort of Aryan Superman. You know, so here is the great white hope who has beaten the Negro, you know. And what is interesting is that Max Schmeling wasn't a Nazi. So he actually didn't really want anything to do with Hitler. And yet he became a sort of key plank in Hitler's propaganda. And what you have to understand with Max Schmeling was that I mean, we've all heard of Kristallnacht, the night in which the Nazis went and smashed up all the Jewish shops and attacked Jews all over the place. Mark Schmeling had Jewish friends, and he hid them all in his flat during that night. So, the idea that Schmeling was this sort of super Nazi is, I think, a lot of people kind of mistakenly think him to be because of the Hitler association, because the Nazis made a lot about his winning the world championship. The fact that he was, in a way, he had his good name kidnapped by the Nazis, that would make him an interesting figure. But there's more to it. That when the Allies eventually won the war, they were quite keen in finding some clean Germans, so to speak. And here was a guy who had Jews speaking up for him, saying, "Oh, this guy helped us." So the Americans found in Max Schmeling someone with whom they could do business. So who do you think became the new CEO for Coca-Cola in post-war Germany? It was Max Schmeling. So he ended up actually quite a wealthy man. And this is now where the whole story comes full circle. He was quite wealthy, but Joe Louis, the great boxer, who in a way made him famous, he died a pauper. I mean, he had pretty much all his money ripped off him and whatever. He pretty much ended up with nothing. So when Joe Louis died, there was no one to pay for his funeral. So who do you think paid for Joe Louis' funeral?
Max Schmeling.
It was Max Schmeling. And therefore you've got the feeling, here is a guy who, okay, he's known for boxing, but here is a guy who I think would be a very, very fascinating guy to meet, because I think he would have a tale to tell, and he would more than likely be quite an impressive person.
He had quite an impressive wife as well.
Oh, go on.
He was married to I think she was a Czech actress, but I think she had dual nationality with Germany. And certainly after 1939, she would have been counted as a German.
Yeah, eventually, yes. Sooner or later, it became purely theoretical, yes.
His wife was an actress called Annie Ondra. And Annie Ondra is the first of Hitchcock's blondes.
Ah, yes.
Because she's in his first talking picture, Blackmail. She has the lead in that film as a woman who comes under suspicion for murder, and she's frankly gorgeous. One of sort of two Germanic actresses that came out of the 1920s, along with Brigitte Helm, who I think to this day, you would just pause and go, actually, to be around in those times, to hang around with people like her. But that was Max Schmeling's wife. So they were a celebrity couple. The film star who had done a couple of English language films. Although weirdly, she could speak English, but she had a bit of a German accent. And
I love you, Tom. But now we will invade Poland.
But she was for the film Blackmail. She was dubbed. Even though she said she could say the lines, she knew English. But there's an interesting video clip you can see on YouTube, and it's a screen test for Annie Ondra for Blackmail, and there's Hitchcock trying to unsettle her and saying, "I've heard rumors that you're a dirty girl," and she goes, "No, Mr. Hitchcock, what are you saying?" And he's just really trying to make her ears turn purple, by saying, "As the actress said to the bishop," it's kind of classic Hitch style. But that was Max Schmeling's wife.
Yeah, I just thought, with Hitchcock, that "I've heard you were a dirty girl." You just got the feeling that her next line could be, "Don't you say that again, or I'll tell my husband."
Exactly. Well, it was a brave man.
But yes, so there we are, ladies and gentlemen. We've got William Patterson of the Darien Project, who I think quite a few Scots would like to have a word with.
I never thought about it like that, but yeah, probably.
Then we've got Viscount Lever Hume. And finally, we've got a chap with a cracking wife called Mark Schmeling. So, yes, we've made it through to 11 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen. So I think we've pretty much managed this one. So, chaps, have either of you got anything to show?
Absolutely, yeah. As I said, video on the Darien scheme on the second channel. The channel is Scottish Feature, and it's the newest one on there. So check it out.
There you go. And Robert?
Yeah, a couple of things. So since we did the last of these, I've set up a new blog site for myself called How's the Comedy Going? Which is what most activists on Twitter say to me when they've run out of things to say. And that's because I wanted to separate my kind of history of film and TV separate from and the stuff that I write and produce. I wanted it separate from my political stuff. So I've set up this kind of blog, and I haven't got a domain for it yet. But if you searched "How's the Comedy Going?" Rubber Wix site, you'll find it. And if you follow me on Twitter, again, there'll be links to it. So I've done 3 pieces on that with my musings. Been asked by the Wellington Project to write something. I'm going to become their cultural commentator. Well, they do politics and history. I'm going to do culture. So I'm going to
You're
do
a cultural attaché.
Yes. So I'm going to do one that's quite topical and is going to land me in a lot of hot water, but I don't care. And that is why James Bond should be white. So wish me luck on that one. And speaking of that, I'm just past the halfway point on editing a Bond video on Her Majesty's Secret Service. So, yeah.
He should be white because he's Scottish.
Well, there's lots of That's one of the reasons. There's lots.
Should be translucent, practically.
Ladies and gentlemen, once he's finished with that and the audience reaction becomes public, his new address will be the ex-Scottish colony in Darien, Panama.
I think I'll be going on. I'll be asking to go on the witness protection plan. Let's have a completely new identity. Hell hath no fury like a woke scold riled up.
Well, there is that.
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, as for me, there isn't really anything imminent. There are various things that are half finished, and one of them I actually decided rather than finish it, I'm going to re-record it all over again. But yes, at some point something is going to happen. But recently there are various things that have been keeping me busy, and what can I say? We try our best. But yes, until the next time, everyone, thank you very much for coming. And well, that's all from the Cyber Past for now. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you, bye.
Bye.